I absolutely love working with color and pastels because I find it's the most fun way to really enliven your look. Some of my favorite red carpet celeb moments are the ones where we've used a little bit of fun color. We often shy away from using color for fear of making mistakes or because we're not sure how or where to apply that color. Today I'm going to share with you some of my top tips and essential tricks on how to keep it wearable, interesting, and most importantly, flattering. Now, like with any of the looks I create, the skin is key, so I'm going to take a little bit of time on skincare prep. I'm applying this beautiful pore refining mask on Aslay. This is really going to help smooth out the complexion before we apply our makeup look today. It doesn't matter whether I'm doing a super dramatic, colorful eye look or a no makeup look. To keep the skin fresh and glowy, it really helps to tie the whole look together and keep it looking modern. So now that this mask has been on for 5 to 10 minutes, I am just removing the excess using some wet cotton pads. This is a great one to use before a big night out or pre-red carpet, just because it's super easy to remove, just leaving this beautiful, flawless, prepped skin ready for the rest of our products. This is looking super fresh and beautiful. I always like to have a few different masks in my kit and in my personal bathroom too, just because our skin changes. You know, it's a seasonal thing. Your skin can be drier in the winter months. It can need extra time and attention or different products depending on the time of the month. So many different reasons why you may need to change your skincare or change the type of mask that you're looking for. If you're working on a client's skin, definitely recommend feeling the skin beforehand and talking to the client also, just so that you get an idea as to whether the skin's dry, needs extra moisture, or a light exfoliation, etc. Now I'm just popping a little moisturizer on the skin. This is quite a lightweight one. I mean, if you're doing your makeup at home, I think it's always nice to leave a few minutes in between applying your skincare and actually doing your makeup look. Sometimes there's not that luxury when you're working on set or with a client. So I often like to keep some nice light moisturizers in my kit that are going to be easily absorbed, but give enough moisture at the same time. Doing a little face massage now. This is really just to help the product absorb into the skin. Also just helps to release any tension in this area and generally get the blood circulation going. So we've got a lovely, beautiful, revived skin to start with. I am applying a primer now. This is a beautiful pore refining primer. These are great to use if you have oily skin, but also work on dry skin too. So they're not going to dry out the complexion, just going to refine the look of pores and give the skin a blurred effect so that it looks really, really flawless. So especially important to make sure that we're working this into the center of the face. I do think primers make a difference. They do hold makeup in place and actually just keep it on evenly and for longer. And with a look like this, which is kind of a little bit of a party look, I think it's important that we make sure the skin is primed so that everything is going to last beautifully. I'm going to move on to foundation application now, but I want to take a moment to talk about Aslay's skin. She obviously has beautiful skin, but as with so many people, there are multiple tones to her complexion. So I think it's really important to actually take a step back, have a look at the complexion, and try and match all those tones rather than finding one that's going to even them all out. That way, the complexion is going to look much more natural. Now, if we actually look at the color of her neck and shoulders, that's darker, as with a lot of people, than the colors on her face. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to color match to her face rather than to neck, shoulders, or décolletage. So I'm color matching to the top of her forehead where the skin is the deepest, and also to this area here where the skin is the brightest. So I'm going to apply the deepest shade of foundation first. This is a beautiful sheer hydrating foundation, and I'm applying this at the top of the forehead. And you can see that is a beautiful color match. It's kind of a neutral tone of foundation, which means it's not too much yellow or not too much pink, but it works perfectly with Aslay's skin. I'm just keeping that at the top of the forehead. And I'm also going to put some of this on the outer edges of the face, so jawline also. Now bear in mind when selecting your foundation that foundations can oxidize. And this means once they go on the skin, and actually come into contact with the natural oils from the skin and the environment, that they tend to go slightly darker. Not all foundations do this, but it's worth bearing in mind if you're testing or trying out a new foundation for yourself. So now that we have that deeper shade on the outer parts of the complexion, I am going to apply some of the lighter shade in the center. Now this might sound quite bizarre, but actually once you blend the two, it's the best way to keep it looking the most natural and realistic, because we're actually just matching with Aslay's skin tone. Same brush, doesn't need to be too fancy, but you can see this is a more yellow base tone and a lighter tone. If there's an area on the face that's going to be the lightest, then it's this part at the middle of the face here. And sometimes you'll find in the summer months you can use more of the deeper shade, and in the winter months then you can use more of the lighter shade. So I'm just going back over the top with my brush just to make sure that everything is buffed into the skin and looking really, really seamless. I'm not taking that foundation too close up under the eye area because we're going to pop concealer there, and I don't want to overload the skin with too much product. Otherwise it tends to crease and move around. I'm also not applying it on the eyelids because the same thing. I'm going to use a primer on the eyelids just to make sure our shadows stay in place. And if you have a foundation underneath that, it tends to make things move and crease. The brush I picked to apply the foundation is kind of like a small synthetic foundation brush, which has got a little flappy texture, which really just helps to do the work for you because you're applying product with it. You can also use the tip of the brush to really buff into the skin. Quite a small brush, but I love working with smaller brushes just to give you a little bit more control as to where you're applying the product. What I'm going to do now is apply our eyeshadow look. I am using an eye primer, and this is just going to make sure that everything stays in place. Now obviously we've only applied foundation at this point, but I like to do foundation, give it a chance to settle, move on to eyes, and then come back and perfect the skin afterwards. This means we can apply concealer and clean up any little bits of eyeshadow that have fallen under the eye area. And this is also when I'm going to apply contour, blush, highlighter, etc. You want to keep each layer of product sheer. And this is really about layering. Layering is the key to give you the most impactful color and actually keep the most long wearing too. So the primer is on the eyelids, lighter than Ashley's natural skin tones, that it's really going to make our colors on top pop, but not too light that it's going to go too gray or ashy. I'm just buffing that in so there's a lovely light layer, and then I'm going to go in with a pencil. These Nude Sticks chunky pencils are great. They're so easy to use and actually really, really long wearing. So I absolutely love working with pencils for almost every look that I create. So I've popped that color on, and now I'm just going in with a little fluffy brush just to blend and diffuse the edges. Isn't this the most beautiful lilac shade? I absolutely love this shade on Ashley's beautiful skin tone. I think this is a really lovely shade to work with. Lilacs, because there's so many different tones of purple, make really interesting eye looks and actually are super on trend. You can take these techniques and transfer them into any colors that you're working with, taking also a little bit of that lighter shade in the inner part of the eye here. Now with color, I think it's important to keep the whole look cohesive and balanced, and that's why I'm adding the color under the lash line as well as on top. So as we've discussed, layering is key, and obviously a pencil is creamy, so this is really going as the base of our eyeshadow look. Anything that goes on top of this is just going to have something to stick and grip to, which means it's going to stay put and we're going to get lots of color intensity. I'm going to take a deep shade of pencil now. This is a darker purple shade, which I'm sketching along the lash line, and also going to bring that into the socket. Now this is the thing to really take note of, guys. When you're working with pastel colors, there are very, very few people that are going to suit bright pastel colors on the eyelids without having any dark to kind of bring depth back to the eyes. So I would always recommend choosing a deeper shade just to give some definition along the lash line. That way I feel you can be free to play with any color at all, because you're going to keep the look flattering. Taking that pencil now and sketching in the natural socket line. Now if you have hooded eyes or a different eye shape, then you don't have to do it like this. You can just kind of color in the outer part of the eye, and it has a similar kind of effect. All we're doing here is really trying to just balance the look and add a little bit of dimension to this eye. Now that the pencil's on, I'm going to work relatively quickly, just taking a soft fluffy brush and blending that deeper shade so that we've got that soft base. Now my recommendation when you're selecting pencils as a base for your eye look is try and opt for kohl or gel pencils. They're easier to blend and a little bit softer generally, so it means that you can apply them and then go back in later and re-blend out the color. You can do this with long wearing or waterproof pencils. It just means you have to work a little bit quicker and the blending process can be trickier. So generally I love to have a few great shades of kohl pencil to work with in my kit. What you want to do with this is it's almost going to be a little base for our liquid liner, as with a lot of the pencil looks that I create. that shape is almost sketched out before you apply the tricky parts like liquid liner. You really want that liner, those angles to be in line with the bottom lash line and the outer corner of the eye. Another way to measure this is it's kind of also in line with the corner of the nose if you hold up something straight there. Now this is going to be a relatively dramatic, colorful look because I really want to show you guys how it's done. So I'm bringing this pencil quite low underneath the lash line. Don't be scared to do this. It can actually make the eyes look so much bigger and be really flattering. If you have beautiful almond-shaped eyes like Asley does, then you can really take that quite low under the center of the lash line. If you have a more rounded eye shape, I would recommend concentrating on the outer part of the eye, which is going to help to elongate the roundness of that shape. So the beauty of this is you can really go back in with your pencil and layer and keep blending out until you have the amount of depth that you would like in those areas. Now that is base to our look. So essentially it's our starting point for this eye look. And already it's kind of an eyeshadow look on its own. And I think actually that's what makes doing colorful looks so much more attainable, is if you're using that pencil beforehand, you don't need to apply tons of eyeshadow to get the pop of color that we're looking for. So therefore you don't have the same fallout of shadow under the eyes. It's just going to last a little bit longer too. Now, as you can see, I've left this part of Asley's lids quite bare. I really want it to be multi-dimensional, and that's what keeps it modern. What I'm doing now is I'm just taking a beautiful lilac matte shadow, quite a small brush, and I'm pressing that over the top of that light color that we applied beforehand. So you kind of slightly lose the color that's underneath, but it really makes that eyeshadow pop. No fallout, and I've used quite a small amount of product, and you get lots of intensity this way. That really is the key when you're doing these colorful looks. Same under the lash line in the inner part here, really just to keep this look balanced. And if it does get a little messy in this inner part here, don't worry, because we're going to clean that up afterwards with our concealer. Now I'm using a MAC pencil brush here. These are super handy because they're great for blending, but they're also precise enough that you can work in small areas. That way you can put the color just where you want it, and you don't spread too much unnecessary color over the lid that you're then going to have to wipe off. Just taking a slightly larger brush just to really press color in now. I'm using such a small amount of eyeshadow, but because it's got that creamy pencil base, it's just sticking on the top, and that stops it looking powdery or going patchy or looking chalky on the eyes, and we just get this beautiful, super matte pigmented finish. Now I am going to work on the outer part of the eye where I'm adding deeper shades. This is sort of a medium shade of purple, and this one has a very, very slight little kind of satin finish, bit of luminosity to it. And the reason I've opted for this is because using eyeshadows with that little bit of shimmer, it's going to mean it's easier to blend and less likely to go patchy. So even though I'm going to go over the top of this with a deep matte shade, applying this first is just going to make sure that there's no patchiness in this area. And I'm really being quite generous with this, almost going all the way up to her brows, and also taking this shade right under the lash line on top of that deeper pencil that we applied before. And I'm also taking some of that under the brighter color in the center of the eye. These little touches are what keeps it looking modern. You know, I remember learning a couple of decades ago now, back when I went to the London College of Fashion and I studied makeup, learning how to do eyeshadow from light to dark with just a graduation of color. And nowadays I really prefer not to do makeup that way. I like to mix it up, have little pops of light and dark, and I really think it keeps it interesting that way. Also taking some of that deeper shade into the socket here to just kind of help frame that lightness. If you have deep set eyes or your eyes are close together, then I would recommend keeping those deeper shades just to the outer part when you're working in the crease or the socket line. Using very, very light, almost circular movements just to buff that color into the skin. You don't want to press too hard because you don't want to move the eyeliner that's applied underneath. You almost want to set it with the powder. Works the same way as setting a foundation with a powder. Put the creamy product to start with, and then you set with the powder just to keep everything in place. So this eye look is not going to budge. She can party the night away and it's still going to be on there. Now, this is where we're going to use our deepest shade. First place that you put that brush is the place that's going to have the most product. So I always like that first place to be along the lash line where we want the most intensity. This brush is great because it's got a little tapered end, so it really allows you to apply product but also blend with precision. Popping that along the lash line, and also I'm going to go over the depth that we have here in the crease. Now when I pick up shadow, what I like to do, just to make sure that there's not too much excess on the brush, is give it a little tap. Try not to blow into your brush. Firstly, it's not that hygienic, and secondly, it tends to make the product go right down into the base of the brush, so it isn't great for your brushes. As you get a little tap, it just makes sure that there's no excess that's then going to fall onto the face. Taking that deeper shade, keeping it really close to the lash line in the outer part of the eye. So the main colors that we see now are this light pastel lilac and then the deep purple that we have in the socket. Now I'm going to go in on the lids with a medium shade of a shimmery color. This is a beautiful mauve tone. It's really reflective with a lot of dimension. So what I've done here is I've just popped a little bit of that purple tone in the inner and outer part of the lid, and I'm just leaving the very center of Aslay's lid still bare because we're going to apply a different shade there. We want this look to be really interesting, with lots of different tones going on. Taking that same color, and I'm just applying that in the center of the eye under the lash line. If you look up for me, doing this just helps to keep everything balanced. Now keep all your brushes to one side after you've used them. I would say you need at least 3 or 4 brushes to achieve this look, unless you want to be cleaning your brushes in between. I'm taking that first brush that had our pastel shadow, and I'm using that to kind of blend and diffuse the edges where it meets the other color. So if you look down for me, you can see there's a little area that I have left with no shadow or pencil on Aslay's eyes. Now that is very intentional. The secret to making these looks last is not overloading the lid with too much product. So I've left that little space so that we can pop our beautiful shimmery tone in the center. Small amount of eyeshadow is really going to be able to grab to the primer that's underneath, and it helps to give that gorgeous pop of color. Now a little tip, once you've finished applying your shadows, go back over the whole look with a soft, fluffy brush. This will help to blend anything that needs to be blended together. It will also help to remove any little bit of excess shadows so that you don't get fallout throughout the day. Using a little angle brush now, I'm going to take some of our deepest shadow, and I'm just going to go over the top of the lash line. You can do this instead of applying liquid liner or as well as. Today I'm going to do it as well as, but it just helps to give a bit of softly diffused extra definition to that lash line. You can also use that angle brush to go back over the top of the socket if you've created this kind of cut crease shape, just to define that slightly more. So at this point, it's really important that the eyeshadows that we have across the lid look seamlessly blended and really clean. The outer part of the eye look, it really doesn't matter if it's a little messy, because this is the part where we're going to clean it up and we're going to make everything look super sharp. So I've popped a little bit of liquid concealer on the back of my hand, and then with a soft fluffy brush, I'm just taking a small amount of that product and I'm going to apply under the eyes. Now at this point, if you wanted to go a little brighter with your concealer, you can do. It's just going to help the under eyes to look really lovely and fresh. And because I'm going to add a deeper contour to the outer parts of the face, it really helps to add that dimension, having the light in the center. Now you can really use your brush as a tool here. Taking the brush with that product, and I'm just sweeping under the eye here to clean up our shape, any little bits of shadow fallout that may have happened that we didn't even realize. Now I've seen a lot of people use tape to apply this shape or use something to map out the shape, but I actually don't think that's necessary, and I think you get a softer, more flattering look if you do it by hand. So what we're doing here is we're using our concealer to clean up, and then a soft fluffy brush on the outer edges to make sure that we don't have a hard line from that concealer. And this is what you're looking for, this softly diffused shadow that just naturally comes out towards the hairline. Now with a look like this, you can use a purple kohl or a colored kohl inside the eye. You can use black, or you can use cream. I'm going to apply cream today. I just love using a cream liner in the waterline. I just find that it keeps the eyes looking big and beautiful. Adds a little bit of brightness too, and this is one of my favorite pencils. This is the Chantecaille Eye Kajal in Nude, which means it's comfortable to apply. I'm just actually using a finger to almost pull that bottom lash line away from the eye, so that while I'm applying that pencil, I'm not actually dragging it along the person's eye. So I'm applying a gel liner to the top lash line now, and then I'm going to follow with some individual lashes and mascara. That's really going to keep this look sexy and also flattering because it's going to give lots of definition to the lash line. I am using a long thin brush for this, almost like a paintbrush. And I'm just following those lines that we applied earlier with the pencil and shadow to help to lift and elongate the shape of the eyes. Just going to share a little tip with you guys. With a flat brush like this, you can use this to actually correct any liner mistakes that you may have made by kind of pressing it over the top of any little uneven areas. So, Asley has naturally curly hair, and often that means naturally curly lashes. So before applying individual lashes, I'm going to take a spoolie and I'm going to comb through her lashes and comb them downwards. Now, you don't need to do this for everybody, but if you have very, very curly lashes, then pressing the lashes downwards is just going to give you space to apply those individuals. So I'm using my no lash lashes for this look, which are really lightweight individuals. And after these are on, I'm going to follow with some mascara. I find that applying mascara after individual lashes helps to blend the individuals and natural lashes together, and therefore gives a more natural look. But if you're applying a full strip lash or even a corner lash, then I would say do your mascara first and then pop your lashes on afterwards. So now that the individual lashes are applied, I'm going to pop some mascara on using the Maybelline Sky High mascara. So the mascara is done and it looks so beautiful. I'm going to share a little tip with you all. If you, like me, get a little mascara on your eyeshadow look whilst you're doing it, just take a dry eyeshadow brush, wait for that mascara to dry. Don't try and do it when it's wet. If you use the eyeshadow brush to go back over the top of that mascara, and it's much easier to brush it away. Moving on to brows now, and I want to give Asley a really beautiful feathered brow look. So I'm going to share one of my best kept secrets for how I achieve that with you all. A little bit of isopropyl alcohol. I always keep this in my kit, and I'm putting a small amount on a cotton bud, and I'm just running that through the brows. And what that is going to do is it's going to make sure that any of the moisturizer, foundation, any of the product that we applied earlier on the skin are removed from the brow hairs, therefore allowing any brow product to stick and then do its job in the brows. Love doing this, just one of the most satisfying parts of a makeup look. Just taking a little spoolie and some of the Anastasia Beverly Hills Brow Freeze, and then I'm combing that through Asley's brows, combing them upwards in the inner part of the brow, and then kind of upwards and outwards as we move to the outer part of the brow. Before you move into filling in any little gaps and really sculpting this brow, you want to make sure that that brow gel is set and dried beforehand. So I'm going to give it a chance to do that, and I'm going to add some definition into the skin. Taking our concealer that we used earlier and just doing a little swipe down the center of the nose. Also going to pop a little bit on the forehead here, chin, and anywhere that we really want to brighten. So I'm leaving that unblended for the moment just to show you guys the color placement of where I'm putting the light and the dark to contour and sculpt Asley's skin. Taking a little bit of a cream contour on a brush here, either side of where we applied that concealer, just popping that on the nose. It doesn't have to be a perfect line because we're blending that out anyway. Now with a slightly larger brush, I'm just swiping that under cheekbones. Now what you want to do is you really want to press under the cheekbone here. You don't want to go too low because that's going to drag the shape of the face down, and you also don't want to go too high either. So you really want to feel for your natural cheekbone and press in to create that kind of natural shadowing and sculpting. Generally what you'll find as well is that it's really kind of in line with the shape of those angles on the eye so that everything stays super flattering. Kind of add a touch of contouring in the temples here, just above our eyeshadow look. I always like adding a little touch of dark in this area too, because I think it really helps to create that illusion that the skin goes in, out, and then back in again. Makeup is all about shade and light, so I want to create as much dimension as possible. The beauty of using a cream product is it's going to melt into the skin and look so natural and seamless. When I'm contouring, I like to use both creams and powders. In the same way as I use creams on the lids before I use powder shadows, I find that using a cream contour first really allows those powders to stick and creates depth and intensity, but in the most natural looking way, so that you never see that product sitting on top of the skin. Now we're going to blend our nose contour. Taking the same brush that I've used for the cheeks and just using sharper edge just to keep our nice clean straight line, and then blend out the outer part here. Now using that same brush that I used to blend the concealer just to go around the outer edges. I do love a nose contour, but I hate to see a nose contour, so I really want to soften those lines just so that it's a really subtle hint of a little bit of light and shadow in that area. And now we are going to powder. I'm using the Laura Mercier setting powder in the shade Honey. I think this is a really beautiful powder, especially for Aslay skin tone, because it's going to set, but it's also just going to brighten a tiny bit too. So I'm really focusing on the center of the face where we want to lift and brighten. This is also going to help to set our under eye concealer, set our contour, and make sure that nothing moves around. Using a small brush just helps me control the amount of product that I'm using so I don't put too much product to make the skin look too powdery. Still want everything to look really natural and almost lived in by the time it's finished. So now that our cream contour is done, I'm going to take a little powder contour on this really lovely fluffy angle brush. See the way that it kind of slopes down one end? This allows you just to take the brush and slot it under the cheekbones, so the brush really does the work for you, giving you this kind of gradient of color, goes to the deepest part, just where we want it, under the cheekbones here. Also going to take just the excess of that product across the top of the forehead just to tie everything together. Same can be done with a little fluffy brush. You just want to increase the depth there with a powder contour on top of our cream. And now for brows. That brow gel that I applied has had a chance to dry, which is exactly the starting point you want to apply your brow pen. If you're working on top of any product that's wet or creamy, then it's not going to stick to the skin. I'm just going to use a little brow pen. This one's from Westbound Co. in the shade Roots. This is kind of a deep brown tone. I always prefer to work with something the same or even slightly lighter than the natural brow tone. That way you can get the definition that you want, but you keep it looking soft and realistic. So what I've done with this is I'm just using that really precise little tip of the brow pen very, very lightly to go in there and fill in any little natural gaps that might appear in the brow hairs. And then as we get to this outer part of the brow, I really want to elongate this brow. This is going to help to balance everything. When we talk about keeping things flattering, it's super important that our brows help to balance out our look. So working at the top of the brow here, prefer to add color to the top of the brow rather than the bottom of the brow, because that's going to lift the whole angle of the brow and the shape of the face. Just dragging that color outwards to elongate the length of the brow. Now I find that most people's brows, unless you're really lucky to have super long brows, need elongating, and thankfully this is the part where you can apply that product and it stays looking natural. The inner part of the brow, if you need to elongate, is a little trickier because you have to use a super light touch just to make sure that you keep those little details looking like hair-like strokes. After you've done that, I would recommend just taking the very end of a spoolie and just going back over the top. It helps to soften and make sure that there's no kind of blobs of color or hard lines. Now that I've really sculpted this brow, I'm taking just a touch of concealer and I am going to use this to clean up any of Aslay's natural brow growth that we don't need to see. Just a few things to remember when you're really sculpting a brow like this. The end of the brow can be precise and clean, but the beginning of the brow always needs to be a little more feathered and soft. You can always go back in with your spoolie just to soften any lines that you may have drawn. And now for blush. First place that you put that brush is going to disperse the most product. You really want that to be in the center of the apple of the cheek, and then you're blending and softly diffusing the edges so you get this lovely seamless finish. And now because we used a setting powder rather than a finishing powder, and the difference between the two is that a setting powder is just going to keep makeup in place, but you're able to still apply product on top and it will stick. This is why I can still go in with my cream even on top of powder and still get this beautiful seamless look. I'm using the same kind of technique that I've used throughout this makeup look to highlight. Applying a cream first to all the little areas that I really want to pop, and then I'm going to follow that with a powder product. This is a Danessa Myrix. It's called Vision Color Flush, and it's a beautiful soft gold that's so flattering on so many different skin tones. You can use a finger to blend this. I'm going to use just a little soft fluffy brush. This is going to give us this very natural soft glow, but because it's a liquid product, it's going to allow the powder highlight I use afterwards to really stick and stay in place without overloading the skin with too much product once again. Now, I always find it can be a little tricky choosing your lip look when you've gone for something fun and colorful on the eyes. So generally, I like to keep it in the same kind of tonal family, but also keep it maybe a little bit more muted and nude. Going for a brown lip liner, but this is almost kind of a purpley brown. So it really kind of keeps it in this family of beautiful lilacs and purples that we've used on the eyes. And I'm using this just ever so slightly over Astley's natural lip line at the top, just to give this beautiful, soft, natural, fuller looking pout. And the lipstick that I'm going to go for is going to be a soft, natural tone. So this darker brown shade is really going to help to define our lips. Using a deeper or a brown lip liner is going to help to keep any lipstick that you use flattering on your skin tone. Now, don't be afraid of using a darker lip liner with a paler or a bright lipstick. Lipstick I'm going for is this beautiful sheer pinky tone from a brand called Uma Beauty. I am obsessed with this lipstick. It's so moisturizing, so glossy, so flattering. And I'm just using a lip brush now because I'm really going to try and blend that with the lip liner that we applied. Now that our lipstick is on, I'm going to take the lip liner again and just use that on the outer part of the lips. Using a lip liner over the top of the lipstick is going to give you a much softer and more natural line. So I'm almost using this just to really contour the shape of the lips. And that darker color in the outer corners of the mouth are just going to give us this really plump, juicy looking pout in the center of the mouth. Now, this is the reason why we have dessert last, because it's the best part. Now, this is the best part for me, so I've saved it until last. I'm going to add a little highlight, which is going to really help to tie this whole look together. This is a pink highlight. It's really going to pick up on those beautiful tones on the eyes. And I'm popping that at the top of cheekbones, and also with a smaller brush, I'm going to put that under the brow. Now we can see where I've applied that concealer, and I don't necessarily want to see it as such a hard line. And this highlight being applied in this area is going to help to just make this area look soft and glowy and beautiful, and get rid of that hard line of concealer. But also the concealer has kind of a dual purpose because it's going to act as a base for this highlighter so that it really sticks and gives us the best shine. And look at that gorgeous glow under brow bones and also at the top of cheekbones too. Sometimes what I like to do when I'm using colors on the eyes like this, take a little of the lightest shimmeriest shadow and even use that to highlight. It's a really nice way to tie the whole look together. Now here is the thing with highlight. As glowy and metallic as you may want your cheekbones, that is kind of the only area that you want super glowy and metallic. So I try not to bring too much of that powder into the inner part of the face. So I'm really keeping that product at the top of cheekbones, under brow bones, and a little on temples, just in the outer part of the face. Beautiful and three-dimensional too. Ashley's going to go into hair and we will show you guys the finished look. So here is our finished look. I've had so much fun creating this look and showing you how to keep color wearable, flattering, but also sophisticated. Key things to remember when recreating this look are that layering is key. You want to go for a cream shadow or a kohl pencil before you apply your eyeshadows. That's going to allow the eyeshadows to stick and the color to really pop. When contouring the skin, it's all about creating shade and light to add depth and definition. And to keep the look flattering, I always like to use a liner and lots of mascara just to really give the eye some definition. Don't be afraid to play and have fun.